Welcome to the stream, everybody. Tonight we're going to talk about why ayahuasca is the most dangerous medicine on earth. And I'm totally serious. It is an absolute certainty that it will kill you if you drink it, or at least some parts of you. And luckily, those are probably parts of you that you will not need. So, yeah, I mean, part of the reason that I did this live stream tonight is to promote the video that's coming up, premiering after the live stream. We're lucky enough to have a relationship with a Quechua shamana named Mama Celia, who had no contact with the outside world until she was 17 years old and didn't learn to speak Spanish until she was 17, didn't even know what a town was. So she's really, really interesting, and she learned shamanism from her grandparents and great-grandparents, and she spent her childhood in the deep jungle, in the lagoons, and along the rivers, and in the caverns, and she really opened up to us, mostly the morning after the ceremony. So do stick with the video. We were a bit tired when we did the interview in the beginning, so it's a little awkward, but if you stick with the first minute and a half or so, once we get to, when Mama Celia's sitting around the fire and talking, it's definitely worth your time. Pretty extraordinary stuff. And so I run into, as a facilitator, I run into a lot of bad information, right? There's a lot of misinformation about all psychedelics, not just ayahuasca. And there's a lot of fear, and that fear can be healthy because ayahuasca definitely needs to be respected. But the reality is that physical deaths, not ego deaths, but physical deaths are extremely rare. And in a lot of cases where that happens, it's because somebody did not follow the, I'm not going to say the dieta, because there are so many different versions of the dieta, and a lot of them include things that are not really necessary to prohibit. In terms of just cleaning yourself and preparing for the experience and making a assertion, that you are serious and that, you're going into the experience with determination, and, all that is great for the dieta. But traditionally, dietas are for preparing to become a shaman, or for working with a plant like Bobinsana or Chiricsananga, that could be either dangerous or is very subtle, and it just requires that there's nothing in your system that can block the subtle effects of these medicines. So, so deaths from food interactions actually never happen. I see people, I don't know where this rumor or myth has come from, but it's not a real thing. And most of the foods that they tell you will actually stop the experience from happening at all or make it weaker. In my experience and observation, and having worked with different tribes that have different practices, most of it is complete nonsense. No foods will interfere with the experience. The one thing that I can say, though, is that you should definitely avoid processed foods. You should do that anyways. But one thing that I've definitely noticed that is really interesting is that people that subsist on a diet of entirely or mostly processed foods, ayahuasca will have no effect on them at all, which is a really interesting thing to consider. What is in those processed foods that is causing this to happen? And one of my guesses is that the heavy metals, or like aluminum type, like what is it, aluminum bicarbonate or something, they put it in pickles. My wild guess here, I'm not a neuroscientist, is that the aluminum somehow jams up your neurotransmitters or your receptors so that there is nowhere for the DMT to dock, because it's full of aluminum. And I think the fact that it actually has been shown to contribute to Alzheimer's, I think that sort of supports my theorization. But yeah, I've seen with my own eyes that people that eat a lot of like white bread and bologna and all that sort of stuff, Pringles, whatever, ayahuasca has practically no effect on them at all whatsoever. And so the real danger is to the church and to Big Pharma. uh, and we can't have those toppling, right? Something that I hear a lot from people that are sort of like in the matrix, like mainstream thinkers, when they're sort of incredulous about plant medicine and ayahuasca, and they're saying that, if you have to keep taking something, then it's it doesn't really work. Meanwhile, Paxil, Prozac, Zoloft, and people that take benzodiazepines, you don't just take those once and you're fine. So it's really strange argument to hear coming from those people, that because you have to repeat a treatment maybe a few times, that it therefore should be dismissed as ineffective. But while we're on the subject of, not necessarily having to repeat something a bunch of times, it is true that ayahuasca oftentimes kills the parts of us that do not serve us, that are not making positive contributions to our life and to our existence and to our relationships. Oftentimes, those parts of us die in a single dose. And that is how I am validating my ayahuasca as the most dangerous medicine on earth, because you are in danger of losing your religion and therefore ceasing your contribution to the Catholic Church or whatever institutionalized religion you belong to. You're in danger of discontinuing your Zoloft and Klonopin and no longer going to see your therapist because you are not treating symptoms anymore. You have gone to the root cause of your issues and actually shined a light in the shadows where you have been unable to look or have refused to look, and you have dissolved the manacles that had enslaved you to habit, to delusion, to insecurity, to low self-esteem, and you have completely annihilated those chains, and that's just the end of it. And it's not just, my crazy outlaw opinion. It's not just ayahuasca, and for those of you that follow my channel and have heard this before, excuse the redundancy because I quote this a lot, but, way back in the late 50s or early 60s, Dr. Humphrey Osmond, who was commissioned by the United States federal government to evaluate the efficacy of psychedelics for treating various addiction and depression and all of this stuff, and his response was that you could probably cure every single psychological and emotional aberration with these compounds, oftentimes with a single dose. And the federal government's response was to shut it down and ban psychedelics, right? Because they work for you. They're looking out for your safety. They're looking out for your well-being. They're looking out for your health. And that's what you would do if it was your job to take information objectively and make decisions that serve on the, behest or at the behest of your populace, right? Yeah, but that's literally what happened. And so more recently, you have to forgive me because I cannot recall this gentleman's name, but it's an easy thing to Google, Johns Hopkins University. And his quote, verbatim, was, "It is simply unprecedented in the history of psychiatry that a single medicine can treat so many psychological problems with a single dose." And the specific medicine that he was referencing at that time was psilocybin, but of course there is a lot of overlap in the efficacy of the various psychedelics. While it is true that certain compounds work best for certain issues, for example, MDMA and ketamine for PTSD, for memory enhancement, LSD, for depression, psilocybin, for emotional trauma, and I think ayahuasca and emotional trauma is probably the deepest and best connection to make. But as I said, there is some overlap, and they all have sort of specialties. But yeah, so it's really truly a remarkable thing to witness on a regular basis, as I do. And, one of the reasons that I feel validated in this kind of clickbaity title about ayahuasca being the most dangerous medicine on earth is that I do see battles rage in people pretty consistently that usually or quite often will take them to the brink. Like as a facilitator, there's a certain line where you don't want people to cross because then there's actual damage that's been done. You know, like if someone flops around a little bit, scrapes their elbow, not so big of a deal. Beating their face into a chonta palm repeatedly and getting bullet ants in their eyes, that could actually be like a significant problem. And so when people do get to the point where they're having that internal battle that is so powerful that it threatens physical damage, it is always because some part of them is being killed by the medicine that they have lived with and that they have integrated into their fundamental sense of self, to the point where when it comes time to destroy it, even though it doesn't serve them, they're clinging to it with everything they've got. And there's memes going around and whatever that say there's no such thing as a bad trip, and that is ultimately what they're talking about there. That with whether it's LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, whatever, when you have these extraordinarily difficult, sometimes violent reactions to these compounds, the scenario that I just described is pretty much 100% the cause. Maybe not 100, maybe 99.8%. And you might say, well, so you're saying that people that have been severely traumatized are clinging to that trauma? No, but they're clinging to the aspects of personality that are rooted in that trauma. And this thing of defining the ego, right? This is extremely important for a healthy person. This is one of the reasons that I don't really buy into the whole ego dissolution thing entirely. I think that that's not quite nuanced enough. That's sort of what we're after, but it's not exactly what we're after. What you really need is a healthy relationship with the ego. You don't want to dissolve it completely. And so, the difficulty is in removing the parasites and flushing them from your system. But yeah, that's the title in a nutshell. Let me check in with the comments here. And tire me in cheese before it can cause excessive mucus. Yeah, no, I'm not Earthworth. I'm not saying that there aren't foods that you should avoid. I'm just saying that a lot of the things that I hear aren't really accurate, that certain foods will interfere with the effect, or that you'll actually be punished somehow by the spirit of ayahuasca or whatever it is. Sure, if you eat certain things, you will purge more, you'll have more mucus, I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to, for me, the pursuit of truth is a big deal, and I want to present everything as it actually is and share the fruits of my research and experience that oftentimes are not consistent with the, mainstream narrative. Although, by the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams. We're demonetized, so we get nothing for the work that we're doing, which includes, as you'll see if you stick around for the video with Mama Celia, helping to preserve the indigenous traditions and customs, and bringing money into communities here that are struggling, especially after COVID. So we're doing a lot of good work here, and we need support in order to continue doing it, and we really do appreciate it. You can find options in the chat and in the description to do so. And by the way, I'm totally open to questions. There's 20 of you guys, and so interaction is definitely my favorite part of Kensho, it's been a while since I've seen you in the chat, so it's good to know you're still out there. There's a line in a Tool song where he says we must define the ego before it's far too late, and he's talking about death. And so I think that we need to be really sort of weary, and suspicious implies fear, so maybe that's not the right, but weary is good enough. That we need to pay attention to every narrative that we encounter, because for example, any institutionalized religion, I think we have to be suspicious of. And I'm not trying to sound like a paranoid conspiracy theorist, but there is a lot of misinformation and what I suspect to be actual propaganda, even in the alternative narratives. Think about it. If you are trying to bring, undesirables into line, putting your propaganda into the mainstream is actually less important than disguising alternative narratives as not propaganda, right? To get to those people. And have I seen any UFOs there? I will get to that, actually. That's an interesting question. And I was actually thinking today about how I haven't told my UFO stories in a long time, and my audience has probably totally turned over since then, so it might be time to revisit that. I also just realized that I keep looking into my light because my camera's usually there, so I apologize. It's just habit. But what I was saying is that, even narratives like, dissolving your ego, that kind of sounds suspicious to me. Like, become totally passive, don't have any sense of identity. Why don't you shave your head and put on a uniform too? You know what I mean? It's just, what we want is balance and to, come into homeostasis with our environment. But dissolving essential parts of our psyche that have developed as, an essential component that contributes to our survival, and gives us our distinct print, that is the reason why I can recognize Maynard James Keenan when he sings and don't confuse him for Celine Dion. Yes, beware of the New Age stuff. It's true that not everything that New Agers say is wrong, but there is definitely a tendency, I think, in the New Age community to just believe things wholesale. In fact, I'm going to make a reaction video that some of you guys aren't going to like because I've looked at my analytics, and apparently Aubrey Marcus, like, you guys watch him more than anything else. And I saw a video the other day that I absolutely... I'll never watch his content again. And he was basically saying that, first his guest was saying that people just need to accept reincarnation, period, end of story. Didn't give any reason, didn't give any grounds for that statement. And then he went on to say that it doesn't matter if your beliefs are true so long as they're beneficial to you. And Aubrey Marcus is like, yeah, that's so beautiful. And then all the comments, people are saying, that's exactly what we need to hear. And I actually think that's one of the worst pieces of advice I've ever heard in my life. You need to use the same critical thinking faculties that you would use to navigate the material world in your spiritual life. You need to develop discipline, willpower, determination, a skill set that you can use in your spiritual life. You don't just blindly accept things that make you feel good. That's literally being dumb. You know what I mean? In any other arena of life, believing things just because you want to would be called stupidity. And I think that one of the reasons that spirituality turns people off is because so many people will just believe things because they want to. They're obviously not smart, not helpful, whatever, obviously untrue. And we need people to have gnosis. We need people to expand their consciousness. We need people to have some kind of sense of spirituality because it's the antidote to the crisis of purpose that we have. It's the antidote to school shootings. It's the antidote to the ocean testing positive for benzodiazepines. So we all have a responsibility to not look like a bunch of dumbasses, to put it bluntly. And I really felt like that advice from Aubrey Marcus is the reason why the spiritual community it's just making us all out to be clowns. So I'm going to make a reaction video to that, and I bet not everybody's going to be happy about it. Psilocybin in small doses, 1/8 ounce or less, has always been a great time. 1/4 ounce, I feel that influences from your surroundings can play an impact on the experience. Well, it's important to remember that with psychedelics, you have to develop a skill set. Speaking of discipline and willpower, people talk a lot about intention. But the thing is, if you haven't developed pranayama skills or, some focus meditation where, a really good meditation for this is to picture a square, red square, blue circle, say, just randomly, and make it hold those colors and those lines. And every time anything flickers or changes, you have to start over, right? And then breathing exercises as well, so that when you get into a psychedelic space, you already have your intention before the ceremony starts, before the experience starts. But you have to develop the ability that no matter how strong it gets, you can stay calm and serene and remain a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven. Because fear, for example, chaos, but fear or chaos, same thing really, is like a interference pattern. And so your ability to receive and, more importantly, to conduct energy and information is diminished. So, and also it's true in regards to this comment about the dosage with psilocybin, that there is a point of diminishing returns in terms of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. At lower doses or moderate doses, I think it's like 2.5 grams of psilocybe cubensis, which is, moderately strong strain. Your neuroplasticity and neurogenesis is at peak enhancement. Any more than that, and neuroplasticity and neurogenesis is actually decreased. So, what you're saying about how, like, when you get to really high doses, there tend to be some problems. It's also true that just from a neurochemical, neurobiological standpoint, huge doses are not the best thing. And so, I don't want to call it advice because that could probably get me in trouble, but my opinion is that those massive doses a few times in your life, when you're properly prepared for it, you have the right environment, they're important. But on average, you should only be taking moderate doses. And for myself in general, I don't take any more of anything than I can comfortably play guitar or sing or work on something, right? That's what these are for. I don't just take psychedelics and sit around staring at the walls. I'm using them to improve various skill sets, or I'm not taking them. And so, I guess, that's definitely something to consider. Do I believe in life path numbers and numerology? Well, I don't believe in people's interpretations of it, by and large, but I do know, for example, that 1111 is a real thing. I started experiencing synchronicities relating to 1111 before I had ever heard of it as a phenomenon. Like, I didn't use the internet much yet. It's like 2010, a little behind the herd in that regard. But, and you can see, I call it functional numerology, right? Like, where you can see why the numbers represent the thing. And that's when it's meaningful. So 1111 is a glyph of the fact that synchronicities happen when you establish communication between the two major parts of the brain, right? Hemisync. You have the conscious and subconscious having a better dialogue than normal, and so the way that changes your perceptual parameters is that you can see the symmetry between your internal being and your external being. And so the first 11 is the external, and the other 11 is the internal. And we could go deeper into that, but I just wanted to give an example. And some numbers that are really significant have gotten a bad rap because of these occult associations. 666, for example, has nothing to do with the devil or anything evil. 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons make up a carbon molecule. And there's other aspects of it. So when you ask me if I am into numerology, it depends on what you mean. I've always kind of identified with the number 6, and according to Gurdjieff's system, I am a number 6, a devil's advocate. And it's a bridge builder. And it is true that I was trained by the military to build bridges and blow them up behind me. When I worked with the Star Tribe, the Sioux and Navajo and various other Native American tribes that were involved with this thing, they told me that I was a bridge builder, and there's some other place in my life where it's come up. So, there is some interesting things with numbers, and I guess what I'm saying is that we know that number lies behind all phenomenology. So, things like gematria that definitely have some reality to them. It does make sense that behind all of the symbols, it's like they're draped over math. So of course these numbers are going to have some fundamental reality, or character, or modality of expression, or meaning, or something. Also, if you want to read something really, really, really interesting in that regard, that explains the nature of number and what it really is and what it really does, the Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley. Regardless of how you feel about him, you have to separate the art from the artist sometimes. If you go to hermetic.com, which is an amazing resource if anyone is interested in that kind of thing, and they have the Book of the Law with the magical and philosophical commentary. And so if you go to the verse from the Book of the Law that says every number is infinite, and then read Crowley's commentary, it'll take you weeks to recover from the crater that's going to be blown in your mind. It's absolutely insane. In fact, I have some videos where I've gone through the Book of the Law with the magical and philosophical commentary and given my own commentary between it. So if you search around my channel, you can find those if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Yeah, I've got some pretty crazy gematria stories for sure. Hebrew, there's a reason why Hebrew is used in the Western occult tradition. And to bring this back to ayahuasca, actually, the Hebrew, I guess, creation myth is almost exactly reflected in the Shuar creation myth. I guess I'm not so sure it's a myth even, but the Hebrew thing, or the tribe of Judea thing, is that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and particularly the 3 mother letters, the supernal triad, created the universe basically, and the Shuar say the same thing about it. But the really interesting thing about Hebrew is that every letter is a number, a glyph, like a hieroglyph, and also a sound. And so in the occult, the reason for the use of symbols is actually because it gives you the ability to compress a bunch of information into a simple symbol, right? And so Hebrew has that innately because every letter has these different characteristics. And so it's a tremendously useful language to use for this kind of ritual work and magical work, because it already has this sort of triune, multi-layered kind of meaning in it. Keep the questions coming, you guys. We have, I think I scheduled the video for 7 o'clock. For those of you that are just tuning in, we're going to redirect to a video that I made that is basically an ayahuasca ceremony with a woman who is sort of recently contacted. She lived in the jungle until she was 17 years old. She didn't know what a town was. She had never seen a toilet. She didn't speak Spanish. In fact, I wanted to mention to you guys that if you happen to be a fluent Spanish speaker, you might notice that our translations aren't exact, but it's because Mama Celia, Spanish is not her first language. And so we've known her long enough that we know what she means. And they're not like big diversions, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult to contextualize this stuff so that it can be understood. And it is true that people from different cultures think very differently. And my experience with indigenous people is that they think very, very differently from us, to the extent that when I interview them, I have to engineer the questions in a certain way. Otherwise, the answer usually is just whatever they're thinking about. It's got nothing to do with what you ask them. And some of the cultures here, like the Warani, who speak the 3rd least studied language on Earth, they don't even have a concept of time, so the way that sort of thing informs the rest of their psychological constituency it's pretty remarkable. So since they don't have a concept of time, for example, when I was trying to organize a visit to the village, and I kept asking the woman, okay, so Thursday at 3 o'clock, and she would just look at me and say, come to the village. And I kept trying, like, okay, well, 2 o'clock on Wednesday. And so eventually I found out that that's a meaningless question. And my number is 246. I mean, I've gotten different opinions about what that might be. What does that add up to? 6 and 6 is 12, 3. I mean, I'll take it. Yeah. So, have I missed any questions? You guys have any other questions? Oh, the alien thing. Have I seen any UFOs down here? That is a really interesting question, because the answer is no, but I have had contact experiences in the United States in a town. One of them, every single person that I ran into the next day started telling me about this contact experience before I even had time to start talking about mine. So there's no way that they just went along with me. You know what I mean? And it was like 5 or 6 people in Durango, Colorado in 2010. That story can be found on my page somewhere. I'll do another video about it. But someone did actually get video of one of the best, least explainable aerial phenomena that I've ever seen above a mountain here. What is it called? Mandango. And according to one of the local Quechua shaman, so the top of the mountain is like cut off, and they call it the sleeping Inca because it looks like an Inca lying down. It has like the classic Inca nose, and so one of the shamans says this isn't natural. Like, this rock was cut this way, forever ago, and so this video that this girl got was from that mountain that the shamans say was cut by aliens all these years ago. What do I eat? I eat mostly chicken in terms of meat. I eat ferns from the jungle. I eat shoots from the jungle. I eat a lot of fruits from the jungle. Whenever we can, we eat stuff from the jungle. In fact, like right now, the ice cream beans are ripening. And if you don't know what those are, if you're ever in South America in the jungle, you have to find some. They're like, this 4-foot long pod with this like cotton candy. It's like white, fluffy pulp or pith. And it tastes like fruity, wet cotton candy. Absolutely amazing. And during this time when they're ripe, everyone is eating them everywhere. I mean, people are walking down the streets with bundles of them on their shoulders, and they have big piles of them in front of the stores, and the indigenous markets, everyone's selling them. They call them guavas, but we call them ice cream beans. Let's see, I've seen an alien multiple times while in sleep paralysis state. Sleep paralysis is definitely something that I always felt like a demon had me by the ankles and was spinning me around the room. It's absolutely horrifying, and I don't know that I accept the official explanation of what's going on there. By the way, you guys, hit the like button for me, please. Like, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon if you would like to join the secret streams. We've been going through Masonic Degree 28, and I have a 32nd degree Mason that's going to come on. We're going to have a talk, and I'm going to post that soon. Speaking of Freemasonry, so don't miss those things. If you're into Hermeticism, or if you think Freemasons are evil, give us a chance. And also, this is interesting. This guy is like a Freemason PR guy, basically. And he checked out my channel and, all of the ayahuasca stuff and, all this other stuff that they generally, you would think wouldn't want to associate themselves with. Not a problem at all. How many degrees are there? There's actually at least 34, which is interesting because you don't see anything online about that. Most people believe that it stops at 33. And so did I, until I was invited to join the lodge. That's not really appropriate because Masons can't ask another Mason to become a Mason. You have to ask, but sort of the person that signed off on my papers, I guess. He actually, when we were eating lunch, he just mentioned one day, there's something above the 33rd degree, right? And I was like, what? So there's at least 34 degrees. And is that like Scientologist levels? I actually have a good answer for that. Scientologists are super insane. I actually wandered into L. Ron Hubbard's mansion. He had long been dead, but it's in Washington, D.C., and that's where I took my first IQ test. That turned out to be, I guess, very, very high. So they went into recruitment mode because they like to have highly intelligent people, I think, because they're good at manipulating others. And so the way that Freemasonry works is that you get more and more valuable information the deeper you go in, right? And with Scientology, he flipped that around. So you get useful stuff that draws people in. Hear the parrots? And then it just gets stupider and stupider and stupider as you go up through the degrees. What's going on, Tommy Fagel? Man, we have really deviated from the ayahuasca subject. By the way, you guys, I haven't plugged this yet tonight, and I have to. We're still doing retreats. We're doing the Mangaru. And then over the next, I guess, month and a half, so it'd be short notice, we found a community where I'm able to do them at a much lower price. There's going to be no frills. All of the, you know, extra stuff like going to see Mama Celia and going into the waterfalls and doing all that stuff is still going to be on the table, but it's going to be additional cost. So it's like a no frills situation, but I am able to do these retreats at a much lower price during the months of January, but it's pretty primitive living conditions, just FYI. I mean, there's not even walls really. There's a roof and your bed, and you know, there's a toilet and a shower, but it is pretty primitive. But that option's on the table, and if you're interested in the retreats, where, you know, we're also teaching Hermetic magic and just generally, you know, I think that taking plant medicine is incredible and it's helpful, and the medicine will work directly with you in ways that a human can't. You know, I think that if anything known to man makes a good case for non-human intelligence of a very high order, it's ayahuasca. You know, but for people that don't have experience, to hear people talking about, like, I talked to the medicine about it, it sounds crazy, but, you know, try it. And you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to imagine that it's not legitimately an encounter with some kind of non-human intelligence of a very high order. But I think that it's not really good. In fact, it makes me hesitant to work with the public at all, to be honest, because I feel like people should have much longer relationships with the people that they sit in ceremony with than they generally do. It's just not enough time. Even when people are here for like 6 weeks or longer, if they have really serious, long-standing issues, we're usually just at the place where I feel like we could really start doing deep work when the month or 6 weeks is up. It's just not that long. And there's so much resistance. There's so much clinging to all of these shadow aspects of our being that, you know, a lot of times it just takes a lot more. And so one of the ways to sort of help with that is that, you know, traditionally the patient didn't take the ayahuasca. The shaman took the ayahuasca and then worked on the patient, right? So there was an initiatory process. And speaking of Freemasonry, in the ancient mystery traditions, there was a psychoactive drink that was consumed. And in my opinion, it was probably Syrian rue mixed with Syrian rue and acacia, right? And to this day, when a Freemason is buried, acacia leaves are sprinkled on their grave. And I think that's the reason that these psychoactive beverages were part of these mystery traditions. But that means that once people took initiation and they consumed these beverages, they had the guidance of people in a higher degree to make sure that they didn't go chasing after wish demons, that they didn't become delusional, you know, that knew them over a long period of time, so they understood their particular set of issues. And, you know, so I think that it's good to learn to have some sort of initiatory process and to actually learn some techniques that are not necessarily part of the ayahuasca tradition to really ensure that you get the most out of the experience. And, you know, so what I do, and the reason I call my business, I guess, syncretic spiritual traditions, is that I feel like the best music is syncretic, right? It's a mixture of many different styles, and we have the blessing of having access to all of this information, all of these different traditions from all over the world. We have now, hopefully, the wisdom and intelligence to sort of sort through them and see what is useful, what is not, what is cultural baggage, and what is actually essential. And, you know, my life goal basically has been to learn as much of it as I can and combine it into a single system. And so that's what we're doing here. That's what we're hoping to accomplish, and I think we've come a long way. And, you know, in terms of integration after the fact, I think that the advent of the interest and understanding of flow state is one of those really, really helpful modern innovations, even though to some extent it's just putting a new label on old stuff. The context of flow state and the diet that can support it And, you know, my particular spin on it, which is that it's not just this sort of altered state of consciousness that you get into when you're like a pro-level athlete that is, you know, in flow, or a musician improvising. It can be a bigger picture thing where you integrate it into your life in ways that your life is in flow state. You're not just, you know, it's not just a temporary modality of consciousness that you achieve sometimes when you're doing something you're really good at. And so I've made some videos about that as well. You guys can find a few flow state videos on there where I talk about what it is. But I'll give a quick example because we have like 4 minutes, and then I need to jump over to the premiere of the Mama Celia video. But, you know, I've always been kind of obsessed with metaphysics, and because I've had this kind of like one-track mind, I've constantly been focusing on the same subject for so long, along with other aspects of my life where, you know, I lived outside of society, I was an outlaw, so there's an uncertainty principle that contributes to flow. And what I realized when I was reading about flow state is that I had created flow state in macro. So that's how my life was, you know what I mean? And so that's what I'm trying to impart to people. And just having any kind of spiritual relationship, or not even spiritual, but even just an infatuation with the mystery that is consistent, is enough to trigger flow state in your life at large rather than in your minute. Yeah, no, ayahuasca, you can't overdose on it. That title was definitely deliberately a little bit of clickbait with a joke kind of buried in it. Ayahuasca will not hurt you unless you have a heart condition you don't know about. That can make it dangerous. Or if you take like a SSRI, or, you know, I mean, and there occasionally have been some people that have just lost their focus so badly that it actually resulted in some harm. Somebody had to kill a guy because he was attacking them with a knife. But those kind of, you know, events are exceedingly rare. And deaths just from consuming ayahuasca are pretty much null. There's a few weird situations. I actually worked with someone who had someone die at a ceremony, and still to this day, no one knows why. There were 30 people there, and all of the rest of the people were fine. So it wasn't something in the medicine. It's not like the shaman made it poorly or put something evil in it and killed someone. This girl just laid down and didn't get up. And everybody else was totally, it's not like, you know, everyone else got sick in a bad way, or, you know what I mean? Everyone was fine except for her. And the family says that she did not use any antidepressants, that she wouldn't have been on drugs. People do have secrets. But everyone that knows her says there's no way that she took something she shouldn't have, and she had drank many times before. So just in the interest of fairness, you know, I do have to admit that I know personally of at least one case where someone has died after drinking ayahuasca for no reason that anyone can tell. You know, 30 other people drank that same medicine and no one had an issue. Doesn't appear that she took anything she shouldn't have. But that's like one out of how many people drink ayahuasca every year at this point? You think a few 100,000 at least, maybe 1 million. And we have like a death every 2 or 3 years. So yeah, ayahuasca is the most dangerous medicine on earth if you are Big Pharma, or if you are the Catholic Church, or you are the United States government, or the Russian government, or you know what I mean? If you're one of those institutions, then yes, ayahuasca is extremely dangerous to your continued existence. And if you're an individual, it may kill parts of you that you do not need, that no longer serve you. So we have to jump over to the premiere of the Mama Celia video. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I hope you all watch this video as well. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us via any one of the options in the chat or in the description. Join our Patreon. We just started a Discord so everyone can get together and communicate whenever they want in the Illuminati community. So thank you so much, and we'll see you at the premiere.